Coming up next on Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, a new GPU for Battlefield 3. How about a monster 600-watt, $1,400 GPU? Too much thermal paste? Bad for processors. Intel still being dogged by that 24 frames per second problem. Powerline networking adding a volume control to your GPU and AMD socket changes. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 135, recorded September 1st, 2011. This GPU goes to 11.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by the man, the myth, and the homebound and dog-friendly benchmarking legend, Mr. Ryan Shrout. How's it going, man?
Doing pretty good. Recovering. Just came in a couple of hours ago from visiting with AMD out in Austin, Texas. Learned some interesting stuff there about Bulldozer and their future roadmap. Obviously can't talk about it yet, but sooner rather than later.
Is there anything you can talk about that you saw in Texas?
More or less, no. We did see some really interesting and extremely high-end overclocking of their Bulldozer chips. I don't think we can give like specifics on it, but you know, they were using things like liquid nitrogen, but also liquid helium, which gets down to about 230, 220 below Celsius.
Yeah,
like minus 220 Celsius. Pretty close to absolute zero, right? So
liquid nitrogen you can pick up at your typical welding supply house, and actually they keep it in a lot of high-end kitchens now because they use it for some interesting dessert stuff, freezing ice cream or
right.
creating certain desserts. But liquid helium is a little more difficult to track down. So
it was a little more dangerous in terms of setting it up as well. Like there was a lot of, okay, 1, 2, 3 goes with
right.
liquid helium. They were using some, because you got to use, I guess they were using a pump for it. You can't just pour it in like you can pour in liquid nitrogen. And
having poured liquid nitrogen on a bunch of CPUs, I have yet to see anything that I would consider a remotely intelligent design. Because when you create, most people just create like the first one we made on screensavers, we had a copper pipe basically welded to a copper heatsink and strapped down.
Right.
Yoshi actually found a place to do the welding, and we poured, we poured liquid nitrogen in it, and it almost immediately started to boil off. And it boiled off in a way that I would call less than elegant and less than particularly safe. It was spewing liquid nitrogen out the top. So I'm curious, like, what were they using for the liquid nitrogen? Do they have a particular design for it? Because I always thought maybe sort of a large open area would allow it to boil off a little less
So they
painfully.
basically have what they call chamber pots that are like that, but not that kind of stuff.
Right.
They're just essentially cylindrical tubes that sit over the processor that they would then just kind of pour it into.
Okay.
I mean, the guys that they had doing it were these, the professional overclocking groups,
right.
And they're much more laissez about a little bit more of that liquid nitrogen stuff. Sometimes it'll splash on you and there's some things, but then whatever, you're getting the point, right? The temperature's going down, that kind of thing. I can't really talk specifics on it, but in terms of what they actually got, but let's just say it started with an 8.
Wow. That's a big number, because I'm pretty sure it's not 800.
No,
in case oops, sorry. I was going to say, in case the people following along at home are not familiar with Twitch This Week in Computer Hardware, well, we talk about computer hardware. We talk about the latest news, and we come back after a quick commercial break, and we get into some viewer questions. We always like to get those. Twitch, Twich at twit.tv, or you can find us on the Twitter at Patrick Norton and at Ryan Shrout. I think we're going to start up with big shock GPU news. Asus Mars 2 dual GTX 583 gigabyte graphics card this week reviewed.
Yes, so last week we kind of previewed it and teased it and showed off pictures of it and just how friggin' enormous it was. Now we can actually talk about the performance and the features and any of that other kind of cool stuff. So the general overview of this card is it's the first time that a dual GTX 580, like true GTX 580s, have been put on a single PCB. This is not an NVIDIA reference design. This is an ASUS created project. They have kind of made a name for themselves in terms of these super high-end boutique graphics cards. They had the original Mars, which was 2 NVIDIA GPUs. They did the Ares last year, pretty much almost exactly a year ago, that was 250, 870 GPUs on a single PCB that nobody had done before. And this is 2 580s on a single PCB, drawing upwards of 600 watts. The card is rated at as high as 600 watts.
Ow.
So yeah, it's a minimum recommendation of 1,000 kilowatt power supply. Power consumption didn't get didn't really come close to that 1,000 watts in our testing, but you know, they definitely want to be on the safe side because this is a card that's going to pull a lot in specific instances. So it's a custom PCB design. It's faster than a GTX 590, which is NVIDIA's own, their created dual GPU card, anywhere from 25 to 30% faster than a GTX 590. It's enormous. Lots of cool stuff in there. 21-phase super alloy power. It does support SLI, so if you want to set up a pair of these in quad SLI, you can do that. And actually, you can add if you already have a GTX 580, you can add it to this card, so you can do 3-way SLI if you wanted to do it that way. Be prepared to spend a lot of money for this card. Retail about $1,400.
Yow.
Which is a lot. It's not a big surprise here. It's not a really good deal in terms of value when you're talking about a $1,400 graphics card. It's 2 GTX 580s. You can buy 2 retail GTX 580 graphics cards for about $900 today, maybe a little bit more than that, or maybe a little bit less depending on the day of the week. So you're talking about the investment of a third graphics card. You can technically get 3 GTX 580s for the same cost as this Mars 2 graphics card. But you know, there are advantages to having it in a single card configuration. You get to run 3 displays off of this that you can't do with a single GTX 580. You know, you can do your 3D Vision surround, your regular NVIDIA surround testing. It's a limited edition of 500 of these. They're only going to make 500 of them. Obviously, this is for people who have a lot of money and want to spend it on computer hardware, right? You know, and there's a reason that.
I was going to say, somebody in the chat room is like, you would need at least a 1,500-watt power supply unit. Phase Change says you need at least a 1,500-watt power supply unit to run these in SLI, right?
Yes. So it would be interesting. We could try that. I bet I could get my hands on a second one because we have in our test bed we use a Corsair AX 1200 Gold, so a 1,200-watt power supply for just these types of situations, right? We want to make sure we have enough power for all that kind of stuff. So clocks on this are slightly overclocked, not a whole lot. The overclocking software that it comes with is pretty interesting, pretty substantial. We talked about that last week with the GTX 580 Matrix card from ASUS. Uses the same software. If you go to the second page of our review, you'll see lots of pictures of how the size of this card compares to previous graphics cards, like a standard GTX 580, even the massive GTX 590 and the HD 6990. And the Mars 2 is just, I mean, it's way out there in terms of size. It's huge. It's a giant brick. Performance actually turned out to be pretty much where they said it was going to be, 20% better or so than a GTX 590 at most resolutions. You know, the higher the resolution, the better capability that you have to show the performance of the GPU as opposed to being bottlenecked by a CPU or something like that. The game, you know, the GTX 590 and the HD 6990, AMD and NVIDIA's dual GPU cards in the high end already, kind of battle back and forth with maybe the slight nod going to GTX 590. So the Mars 2 obviously overtakes that as the world's fastest graphics card, and it comes fairly basically clocked, I think 816 megahertz, or no, 788 megahertz, something like that. But I was able to get up to 875 megahertz completely stable, and that's on each GPU, which gives you about another 12% clock speed and then about 10% performance gain from that. So obviously if you're spending $1,400 on a graphics card, you probably want to make sure you get every little bit out of it. So you'll be able to do that with the overclocking and stuff like that. Power consumption, whole system power consumption under load, 658 watts, which is about 125 watts more than the GTX 590. So yes, you're going to get more performance than those super high-end cards, but you're going to pay for it in terms of power consumption. But the cooler is really nice. It actually was running at a lower temperature than either the GTX 590 or the HD 6990 by a considerable amount, actually. And actually was cooler than a single GPU GTX 580 reference card, which is, you know, kind of goes to show that the reference design coolers from both AMD and NVIDIA tend to be on the cheap side, not on the most efficient side, right? Though they like to tell you that it's to leave room for their partners to create newer designs. I think it's just cutting costs and trying to do that type of stuff. Keep the prices down, whereas if you're selling a $1,400 video card, you don't really have to worry about prices coming down.
You think?
Yeah. So final thought on all that is fastest video card around, limited edition, $1,400. Probably got to be a little bit insane to want to buy it, or not insane to want to buy it, maybe a little bit insane to actually buy it. But people bought all the Ares cards, and they were about $1,200, $1,300 as well, and they made 1,000 of those, and they sold out on all of that as well. So I have no doubt that ASUS will be able to sell all of the Mars 2 dual GTX 580 cards that they actually produce. So crazy people exist, and high-end PC gaming, obviously not dead.
It's not dead yet. Windows 8 is not even born yet. It's still mostly, well, it's not going to be around for a while, but Windows 8 news is steadily leaking out. We've seen the interface, we've heard the specs, and one of the more interesting ones just came out. Ryan tracked this one down. Windows 8 will support mounting ISO and VHD files natively.
Doesn't it sound like something they should have done a long time ago?
Yeah, I think every operating system should do this. So the idea is that, you know, ISO file, if it's not familiar, if you've never spent any time downloading things off of the internet, ISO files are essentially all the folders and files, you know, on a CD or DVD or a drive for that matter. You basically turn that into one Uber file that you can access. Instead of using like Slicelaw's virtual clone drive or Daemon Tools, you'll be able to natively access this. This is good. They're also doing the VHD files, which means you could create some backup systems, automated backup systems use VHD files. Oh, okay. So that'll be really interesting, whether or not this is more for high-end corporate stuff, but I thought it was interesting, definitely with you, thought that was interesting. And the other thing I thought was interesting this week is I could have sworn, like, a year ago that Intel was talking about making, back in June 2010, was talking about making an all-digital random number generator. And then in the last week, right, the first article I saw, IEEE Spectrum is behind Intel's new random number generator. PC Magazine was talking about Intel tips crypto element for Ivy Bridge chips. So basically, they've finally got a digital random number generator that they announced this week, or no, I want to take it back, last week actually. So it's going to be into the Uncore peripheral logic that will surround the cores at the heart of Intel's 22-nanometer chips. The DNRG will be built into products across the spectrum. And it's really interesting because up until now, the random number generators, which are critical for doing sort of really interesting crypto, or for that matter, just securing your online shopping, right, have always been analog, and apparently were one of the last really great power hogs inside the chip. So spectrum.ieee.org, look for behind Intel's new random number generator, and it's been interesting to watch a bunch of people start writing about this. There's some interesting, if you're curious about cryptography, online security, shopping, stuff like that, it's worth investigating, spending a little time to read up on that one, because there's some cool stuff there.
It's interesting, as a computer science background that I have, that this will basically take away one of the first-year projects every computer sciage major had to do, was to design a random number generator. And it was always confusing to me. I was like, how is this still a problem in the world of computer science? They had to figure out a really good way to do that. So
I don't think they're going to take that project away, because I think that project is there to get you to think about computer science in a very particular way. I could be wrong. You know, I'm sure there's going to be the comp sci majors in the chat room will start stomping on me.
Fair enough.
AMD graphics cards, mod a dial that goes to 11 on your AMD graphics card. I flat out refuse to open this story because I want you to tell me that somebody's actually like hardwired a physical meter or a physical potentiometer onto the GPU that they can like access from the front of their system. It's probably inside the driver though, right?
No, you were correct. Somebody has figured out how to map a physical dial to the overdrive software in the ATI AMD control panel so that you can control the clock speed of your GPU with this dial. It was on a Hackaday website, I believe. You can click through there and see what they actually did. I'm trying to remember what exactly.
Oh, it's a Griffin PowerMate.
Yeah,
so
there you go. Okay.
So Griffin years ago started doing basically USB audio or USB audio level dial, USB volume knobs. The PowerMate 3.0. So basically, it gives you the Griffin PowerMate gives you. It turns a potentiometer into something that feeds a USB line on your computer. That's so brilliant. Fred uses an auto hotkey script that he wrote to capture the input from the spinner, process that information, then adjust the GPU clock speed in the background. Since the clock on his ATI Radeon 5800 can be adjusted using the AMD GPU clock tool, it's an easy choice for this application. So basically, he's loading the application he wants to run and turning the knob up. Until it crashes. That is so unspeakably awesome. Sorry, I just got very excited there. My apologies.
I thought it was pretty cool too.
That's
the simple things in life.
That is so awesome. Yay! And by the way, Griffin Technology has a pretty awesome "Getting Started with PowerMate 3.0" article. Wow, I never realized that. Never even thought about mapping that to a script. I'm going to go dig mine out and start playing with it.
Nice. So OCZ also announced this week the availability, the pending availability, I guess, the high-performance Revo Drive Hybrid. I think we talked about this back in June during Computex is when they first started to kind of release the information on this. And the idea is it combines a PCI Express-based solid-state drive with a 2.5-inch or standard SATA hard drive all in one unit. So the idea here is that you're getting hybrid storage technology, kind of like what the Intel SRT does, or is it ST? I don't remember. SRT, I'm going to go with that allows you to use an SSD not for a main drive, but as a cache for a standard spinning drive. This does the same thing, but all self-contained in one unit. And the benefits are that it doesn't have to run on an Intel Z68 chipset. You can run this on any platform that will accept a PCI Express SSD, which is basically anything with a PCI Express slot. It doesn't have to be run under Windows. It doesn't have to be run with any specific drivers or anything like that in mind. You can run this on AMD systems, Intel systems, anything you want. You can do that on this. So that's kind of the advantage here. It's not software-based. Well, it's technically, I guess it is software-based, but it's happening on the controller level, not inside Windows or inside anything like that. They announced, I think they only announced one model at this point, which is a $500 for a 1 terabyte spindle drive and a 100 gigabyte SSD. So you think about it, that's actually a 2.5-inch drive. So that explains, it seems kind of expensive for a 100 gig SSD and a 1 terabyte hard drive for $500, but keep in mind that the 1 terabyte 2.5-inch drives are significantly more expensive than the 3.5-inch 1 terabyte drives that we use in all of our desktop systems as well. I'm still kind of hoping that they'll release a model that's maybe 500 gigs with a 50 gig SSD or something like that, something that they can lower the price down to maybe $300 or something like that, because I really think people will migrate to these types of solutions that are combined. They don't have to worry about setting stuff up in Windows after the fact. They don't have to worry about whether or not they do it before or after the Windows install, but they get the same type of benefits as the Intel SRT technology in a self-contained unit. So, the biggest concern, the most emails we get about solid-state drives are either about reliability or I bought a 32 gig version. I can't fit all my stuff on it. How do I move certain folders around, right? And how do I move my documents folder and that type of thing? So this might prevent any necessity of that.
Good stuff. If you've been contemplating Powerline networking, I highly recommend an article called Hands on Powerline Networking: How Well or Not Are the Latest Generation Devices Working? This is Brian Dippert, I hope I'm saying his name right, basically did about 250,000 rounds of testing, TCP, UDP, with some of the latest generation stuff. One of the things he points out that is the quote 200 megabit per second unquote Powerline adapters now advertised on sale for around $50 for a 2-pack. 500 megabit per second adapter 2-packs are selling for not much more, around $75 for a pair. And it's interesting, having watched this, like Powerline 1.0 was a nightmare. I've seen the standard mature quite a bit. Its performance is going to vary a lot depending on the quality of the cable in your house and what's going on. It's interesting, some of the performance he's seeing, some of it's less than it was a few months ago, some of it seems to be better. He definitely says to check out Sigma Designs. I'm not going to reveal too much because people should go read the article. But it's interesting to look at the performance of the hardware for this, because some people, you know, Ethernet, if you can't pull Ethernet in your house or your apartment, and 802.11n is getting stomped on by the walls, which in a couple of the places I've lived in recently, 802.11n just would not get to the other side of the house. And you're trying to figure out how to bridge that. This is definitely a way to do it without looking at a wireless repeater.
I've had some pretty good success with it. Older houses do have a lot more trouble with Powerline stuff. But it's never been fast enough. Even you know, so we're looking at some of the rates here that they've come up with in terms of megabits per second. It's not fast enough for me in terms of wanting to network my whole house on it. What I did use it for was my wireless router was all the way upstairs in a corner. My game consoles are downstairs in the family room, and the other end of the house in the corner. Wireless network connectivity through like one of those bridge items was kind of flaky, hit or miss. Bought one of these units. It doesn't need to be fast for the console, right? You're talking about, I think mine might have only been rated at 25 megabits or something like that, but it's more than enough. It's consistent connectivity that I was after in that case, which is what this can provide. It's not gonna, I think most people would think you're going to get gigabit type speeds out of this.
You're not.
But you're obviously not. I think they're maxing out at like 50 megabits per second when they're looking at the TCP stuff, TCP throughput. So,
which is enough to do some HD streaming around the house with no problems.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was interesting because he did like 72 rounds of testing, like, you know, through the different nodes. Basically, like, you know, one node is dining room, living room, bedroom, and the mud room. And it's interesting to look at also just the different speeds, like between the dining room and the living room is considerably lower than between, say, the mud room and the bedroom. So it's the quality of your power will vary. If your house is wired improperly, it can create problems. But I thought it was it's been a while since anybody's really gone nuts with a lot of testing on home Powerline networking and posted the results. So I thought that was worth talking about.
Definitely.
All right. Before we get to our questions, we take a moment to thank one of our sponsors this week is Netflix.com/twit. There where you can go to sign up for Netflix. Ryan, you want to tell them a little bit more about what's going on with Netflix?
Absolutely. Netflix, if you have been living under the proverbial rock for the last, I don't know, a lot of years, will help you stream thousands of TV episodes and movies directly to you instantly, which means you save time, money, and hassle. There are several easy ways to instantly access streaming movies and TV shows with Netflix. You can watch Netflix movies and TV shows on your Mac or your PC or your iPad with the iPad app. You can watch on your phone, like your iPhones. A lot of Android phones now support Netflix as well. If you have a gaming console like an Xbox 360, PS3, or a Nintendo Wii, you can watch Netflix right on your TV that way. Even if you're not a gamer, you can watch Netflix on your TV with an Apple TV or Roku box. These are fairly inexpensive devices and pretty easy to set up and get going if you're interested in that. With Netflix, you can watch movies and TV shows instantly using any of those devices, and you can begin watching a movie or show on one device and finish on another device. So if you're in the middle of watching a movie, you got to get up and leave. Maybe walk out to the bus, get on the bus, get on your train, wherever you're going, you can finish that show on your iPad or iPhone as well, which is pretty sweet. Whichever way you choose to access Netflix, you can watch as many movies and as TV shows as you want, any time you want, and you can cancel at any time. Try Netflix today for 30 days free. Go to netflix.com/twit. Be sure to use that URL when you sign up for your free trial, netflix.com/twit, TWIT. We thank Netflix for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. We hope you enjoy watching instantly with Netflix. Shall we get to some emails?
Yeah, you want to start out with Mike and his high-end system build?
We can absolutely do that. Mike says, since I'm out of college and now have a disposable income, I'm going to do just that, dispose.
Send it this way.
Ryan, I'm very interested in the high-end system on the PCPer.com/leaderboard website, updated August 22nd. My GPU question is debating between the AMD Sapphire Toxic 6950 and any competing NVIDIA 570 card. I have been told the biggest difference between these are the drivers. What are your what are your opinions on these two cards and the respective drivers? I have heard NVIDIA makes the superior driver. Do you agree? Quick question too: should I wait for Battlefield 3 to release before I buy a system? It sounds like the new Battlefield engine is going to lay waste to current GPUs. I get in these debates all the time with people who tell me that NVIDIA's drivers are better than AMD's drivers or vice versa. In my opinion, and in my experience, both drivers are very stable. They're both very reliable. Both companies tend to put out new releases fairly regularly. AMD has had a very consistent pattern of releasing a new driver every month for at least several years now, which is nice. NVIDIA has kind of picked up the slack on their end and has started to do that type of regular release as well. And that's important because as new games come out, it's important that the drivers are updated for graphics cards to take advantage of it. You know, especially if you have like multi-GPU or something like that, you want to be able to use both your graphics cards as soon as Battlefield 3 releases, stuff like that. I think you should take everything else into consideration before you consider the drivers specifically. We test a ton of video cards here and don't have any specific issues with NVIDIA's or AMD's installation process, their driver removal process, the actual use of the driver, the stability of the driver. It seems to be about the same going either way. So as far as the 6950 versus the 570, look at the performance numbers, look at capabilities if you want to go SLI or Crossfire in the future. But I don't think drivers really need to be an issue there anymore. A long time ago, it might have been said, it might have been true that AMD or ATI was the lesser of those, and they definitely have addressed that since.
And that was like, I was going to say like 5 or 8 years ago, you might have run into some issues where one of the manufacturers had made some architectural decisions that they were suffering to keep up. But basically the end result of that is both NVIDIA and ATI know that they are in deep caca if they start screwing up driver architectures and not releasing updates for products that came out in the last few years.
Very much so.
How about waiting for Battlefield 3 to come out? I mean, because partially we're always like, wait to buy a GPU, because the longer you wait, the more power you will get for less money.
That is almost always the case, and I think that'll be the case here, right? So Battlefield 3 is coming out in October, I guess.
Right.
Not very far away, just a little bit over a month. Today is September, right? Yes. So a little bit over a month before that happens. Will you see new GPUs before then? Maybe. I'm not sure. I kind of doubt it in terms of actually having it available day of, that type of thing. Right. And if you buy a 6950 or a 570, it's going to play Battlefield 3. I can report that Battlefield 3 will be a beast on graphics cards, but it's not going to be that big of a beast. And unless you're going to change your budget for what you want to spend on a graphics card, waiting, even if new cards happen to come out in October, say the end of October, a couple of weeks after Battlefield 3 or something like that, the amount of performance you're going to get for that same dollar amount isn't going to change dramatically. Right. So I would say buy that system now. You can play other games in the meantime. Deus Ex is very, very good. What a Space Marine demo came out, and I've heard a lot of good things about that from people on our staff and that type of thing. If you want to be a PC gamer, now is a great time to be a PC gamer. There are a lot of good titles coming out between now and the end of the year, especially. Battlefield 3, Rage, all those good things. So
many good things are coming.
Yep.
Peter is committed the ultimate sin. He is, well, I'll just read his email. Brilliant podcast, enough said. Thank you, Peter. He has a 3-year-old Tranquil SQA 5H Windows Home server with an Atom 331.6 GHz CPU. Recently, he had a disk failure which caused his hand to fly out and whack the top of the server. What? It used to work with the old hard disk that stopped spinning? Yeah, yeah, that's thin, Peter. Anyway, the thump dislodged the heatsink from the processor. The heatsink is connected directly to the chassis, and the motherboard is attached in a vertical position. Although the box powered up, it shut down just after the initial. Okay. So he put the heatsink on, the box powered up, it shut down just after the initial Windows splash screen appeared on. Restarting the BIOS gave an error saying, quote, the processor shut down due to a thermal event overheating, end quote. He bought some thermal paste, cleaned off the old paste, applied the new paste. The heatsink is in contact with the main processor and the two other chips on the motherboard. Now the machine will boot into Windows, but the idle temperature is the processor is a whopping 130 degrees Celsius. The processors are completely covered in goo, and the connection to the heatsink looks good. The fans are spinning and air is flowing, but I cannot get the temperature down. Any thoughts before I buy a Synology box? Yes. You installed with too much thermal paste. Actually, when you say the processors are completely covered in goo, that implies that you have gone splork, or with the little... It was funny, I was talking about... on Techzilla that comes out on Labor Day, we did one of the things we did for kind of like Labor Day projects was upgrading your CPU cooler with something that was less loud. And you know, the number one mistake is putting on too much thermal paste.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, put less thermal paste than you think you need. You know, scrape it off. A business card works really well to scrape off the excess thermal paste. A lot of people believe in the twisting of the heat sink on the top of the CPU, which A, may not be possible on your particular system, and B, I always get a little nervous about twisting the CPU. But try cleaning it off. You know, get your rubbing alcohol out, get an old rag or a paper towel, clear all of the thermal thing. Because basically, if you put too much thermal paste on, it turns the thermal paste on from something that helps your heatsink conduct heat off of your CPU and turns it into an insulator in between your heatsink and your CPU.
Correct.
So my guess is that you need to clean off the thermal paste, put considerably less thermal paste on, reattach the heatsink, and see if your temperatures... I wouldn't be surprised if your temperature dropped by more than half. Because 130 degrees Celsius seems a little steep for an Atom processor.
Quite a bit. Especially one of those low-power parts.
Yeah, that's just a lot of heat for a little tiny CPU. Adam has a question about home theater PC stuttering. G'day, guys. New listener from Australia. I'd like to apologize for the Australians in the audience. Love your show. To the Australians for that horrible accent. Love your show. Keep it up. He says, I have a home theater PC, which I think needs a dedicated GPU. I'm currently running a Core i3, and, well, he's got 6 terabytes of internal storage and WD green drives, an Antec EarthWatts 430-watt PSU, 2 gigs of RAM, 60 gigabyte SSD for the OS, which is overkill. An SSD is total overkill for a home theater PC, although it will launch your applications fast. He says, the problem I have is that when I force the Intel graphics software to display 1080p at, say, 24 hertz on my FHD plasma TV, I get a lot of judder every few seconds when playing local content. The only way to get rid of this is to play 1080i at another refresh rate, say 29 hertz, and the video playback is smooth. All the content currently on discs are DVD rips in the video TS structure. There is no compression done to any file, so it's playing native resolutions. I've yet to see what the computer does with Blu-ray, as I mostly play them on a dedicated Blu-ray player, which plays fine at 1080p. So my thinking is that this is the dreaded 24p playback problem with Core i3 CPUs. I would say actually with Intel CPUs or Intel GPU technology in general. Hence my desire to get a new GPU. Can you please recommend a cheap and quiet? Quiet is especially important GPU that will work. If it helps, I use a Silvertone LC16 case, which is pretty big, but not big enough for a full-size graphics card. Where to begin? So, you know, there is a issue for several generations of the Intel GPU or the Intel graphics technology where it will not do proper 24 frames per second playback. So it ends up inserting proper 24 frames per second playback is actually 23.976 frames per second. Right. So the end result is when you try to, and that's basically what movies are shot at. So Intel's HD graphics, the 3000, 2000, I want to say they basically insert an extra frame every 40 frames, and that causes the judder, the stuttering effect that you're finding so frustrating. The other question is, I'm not familiar with the frames per second of the native content in Australia, but I want to say it's 50 frames per second.
I don't know. So he's saying his content is what is it? DVD rips, video TS structure, no compression. So, you know, it sounds like this would be an integrated graphics issue. So.
Basically, he's forcing content to play at 24 frames or 24 hertz on his plasma TV. So yeah, if you're forcing the Intel graphics to play at 24 hertz, that's probably problem number one, because you're basically, your Intel GPU's definition of 24 frames per second is different from your Blu-ray player or your HD TV's definition of 24 frames per second. You're getting an extra frame inserted. You could choose another native refresh rate for your home theater PC. That would take care of it. If you really want 24 frames per second for your movies, yeah, you're going to have to go to an outboard GPU.
And there are lots of quiet, low-cost alternatives in the Radeon, you know, 5000, 6000 series, as well as the GeForce GT and GTS series. I'm trying to look up here. If you look on Newegg, there are 124 fanless video cards, which is a lot. But let's look at something that's maybe in the more modern landscape. So if you want something low cost, you know, you can get a Radeon 6670. It's two slots for about $89. You can go down as low as, you know, 30 and 40 bucks if you want to get two or three previous generations of graphics card. GeForce Radeon 4670, you know, like Radeon 6570, $79. It's a single slot, it's passive, it's half height, so this will fit in any kind of home theater PC you'll want to build now or in the future, and that will definitely take away any possibility that it's your integrated graphics on the Core i3 processor kind of being at fault there. I can't say 100% that that's the issue though, but it's worth taking something low cost like that that's not going to add any noise to your system and just a tiny bit of power for video playback to see if that gets rid of any of the issues, I guess.
There you have it.
We have an email from Bill about an 802.11n adapter and router. Bill says, since Monoprice is offering a highly rated basic 802.11n USB adapter for about $7, was wondering if I could use two of these to get better bandwidth between my PC and my wireless hub, or if they would just interfere with each other. Thanks. I have no idea.
The short answer is almost definitely not, unless you're, cause it's kind of funny, you go to monoprice.com, and I never realized they had this many 802.11n adapters. I don't know if we can pull my screen up here, but, you know, $13.95, I assume since he said $7, we'll go to like the Ultra Mini USB wireless LAN or the Mini USB wireless LAN adapter. Average user, okay, one user, 100%, that's not much of a satisfaction rating.
Correct.
But go to the one up here, it's 23 users have, you know, it's averaged like 4.5 stars. That's actually pretty good. It's not like, you know, I prefer like 100 or more votes on Amazon.com, but, you know, 25 people saying they were pretty happy with it's pretty good. You know, if you were saying I wanted to try a new adapter on my computer, I'd say absolutely. When you're looking at Wi-Fi adapters, everybody's like, oh, it's a 200 milliwatt Wi-Fi adapter. It's going to frickin' connect everything. It's not. When you're looking at Wi-Fi performance, the number one thing to look for is the sensitivity of the receiver. Number two thing to look for is the antenna strength, and you have to be careful because sometimes if you go for like, you know, I've got a 14 dBi directional antenna, that's great if you're only ever pointing it at, say, the house from the garage. As you go with, as you up the decibel levels, especially on the, sort of an omnidirectional antenna, you basically squash out the RF footprint. So like a 6 dB antenna is going to kind of work better this way, but you're going to redirect the energy that would normally be radiating, because you know, when you're looking at an antenna, sort of normally an antenna radiates as you start, before you start getting into antenna design. your Wi-Fi is going to radiate equally in all directions. And then as you start increasing the sensitivity of the antenna, first you kind of, for an omnidirectional, first you kind of take the vertical out of the picture as you increase the decibels that as the decibel level of an antenna goes up, you're basically first squashing out the vertical, creating this kind of giant torus shape. And then you go into directional antennas, which basically work in a very small angle. So, you know, if the 802.11n adapter you're looking at is more sensitive, this is good. A more sensitive receiver is kind of the biggest hurdle, followed by the antenna strength, then distantly followed by the power of the radio inside of there. The problem is you're not going to be able to attach, unless you built like a smooth wall or a mono wall box yourself, or maybe if there's been some radical changes to some of the homebrew operating systems for routers, you're not going to be able to plug an 802.11n adapter into your router. What you can do with your router is 802.11n, 802.11b and G was really easy to attach an external antenna and kind of give yourself more oomph on your router. 802.11n, because of the MIMO technology used and the multiple antennas, tends to be considerably more difficult. There are aftermarket antennas you can look at. I'm not going to get into discussing the sort of FCC issues with mixing and matching routers and antennas. Under the rules, like 2.4 gigahertz spectrum is the Wild West. You can do anything, but as far as the FCC is concerned, it is grossly illegal to basically connect an antenna that has not been certified for operation with a router. I can go on and on about why that results in all the sort of weird sort of connectors used in 802.11b and G and N. But you could actually try to find a more sensitive receiver for the notebook. That might help. Shifting your router inside your house can help a lot, actually. Trying different locations for your 802.11n router. Using a repeater can actually help a lot, but it's doubtful that you're going to be able to plug one of these inexpensive adapters into the router itself. So, you know, I've been surprised. 802.11n seems to work considerably better if it's on the same level as your computers. Like if the 802.11n adapter is downstairs and your computer is upstairs, I find that I have to pretty much keep the 802, the sort of computer closer to the 802.11n antenna than I would with G. I can move to the farther end of the house. Because we used to keep our 802.11g adapter downstairs in our old house, and then when we moved to 802.11n, we couldn't reach like the bedrooms at one end of the house, so I ended up having to move the router to the upstairs level. A lot of it depends on the wiring in your house, the plumbing in your house, the position of the router in your house. I would start experimenting with different router positions. Smallnetbuilder.com actually has some fantastic tests. You know, I talk about them every chance I can because they basically test every router they get in. They test, you know, basically in a real house, in a, you know, where they test performance at a bunch of locations, and you can also try to find a router that's more sensitive or more effective with sort of longer layouts. Anyhow, I could keep talking about Wi-Fi and put us both and the entire chat room to sleep.
No, it's good information. You know, everybody just assumes you upgrade to N and instantly things get better. That's definitely not the case.
We were hoping that was going to be the case.
Let's see, we got another email here from Dylan who's asking about AMD sockets. He says, my question is this. Why has AMD seemed to abandon the very stable CPU socket lineup they have had for years? AM2 and AM3 were great because almost every part was available in one or the other, and the transition was very gradual. I recently built a Llano system for a local family, which was awesome, by the way. The A8-3850 far exceeded my expectations for the cost. I was surprised to see it used a socket called FM1. The Zacate chips that compete with Atom use the BGA 513 socket. It's not really a socket. It's BGA, ball grid array, kind of soldered onto the board. The new Bulldozer chips will be using AM3+, and the next generation pile driver APUs will be using FM2. If I build more FM1-based systems, am I destined to have just 2 chips to choose from for this socket? Will it be forgotten and phased out just like Intel Socket 423 for the first Pentium 4s that lasted less than a year? It's an interesting question, and one of the high points for choosing an AMD platform has been the consistency of their socket migrations. The fact that you know, AM2, AM3, AM3 Plus are kind of all backwards compatible. They're not forwards compatible, although a couple of instances they have been. But if you buy an AM3 Plus motherboard, you can use an AM2 or an AM3 based processor in those, so you don't have to upgrade your whole platform at once, which is kind of nice. So the reason they built the FM1 socket which is used in the AMD A8 series, the APU, the Llano APU processors that came out this year, is because they needed to divert here because the motherboards built for AM2 and AM3 and AM3 Plus didn't have any consideration for display output support, right? So just because, you know, the integrated graphics was always on the chipset for those previous generations of processors, now this is the first time it's been on the processor. So the pin-out configuration had to be designed differently to support display output configurations. So I think much in the same way that motherboards in the Z68, or I'm sorry, like the P67 versus the H67 chipsets from Intel, right? The Sandy Bridge parts, you could install them in either one. If you installed a Sandy Bridge part in a P67 motherboard, you couldn't use the integrated graphics because the motherboard wasn't designed that way. It wasn't designed to have that functionality. It couldn't have that functionality. And it wasn't until the Z68 chipset was released that you could get the best of both worlds in that regard. With this release, I think there were technical reasons for it, and then there were customer capability things that they wanted to address there. They didn't want people to install this, wonder why they weren't getting integrated graphics on their AM3 motherboard, and have to say, well, it's because your motherboard wasn't designed for display outputs in mind. I think unfortunately FM1 is going to be a chipset that will be, or a socket that will be kind of short-lived. There won't be a huge, you won't see continuing processors for that socket going down the line once Trinity, which is the next generation APU based on the pile driver architecture and another iteration of the Radeon GPU architecture is released. It will probably use a different socket, and it will probably not be backwards compatible with FM1. And
right.
I think this is more of a result of a very dramatic shift in CPU architecture and system design on AMD side. AM2, AM3, AM2 Plus, AM3 Plus, they were all very similar. They were very modest upgrades in terms of processor technology. They all stayed with DDR2, DDR3 memory. They went from 2 cores to 3 to 4 to 6, but the underlying architecture was very much the same. This is definitely not the case once we get into Bulldozer and once we get into Llano and Trinity and that type of thing. So I'm a little bit more forgiving in that case, because it is such a dramatic shift for them, although, we'd always like to see it, stay as stable as possible. But if you look at AM3 Plus, it is going to support Bulldozer. It's going to come out later this year. So you'll have an upgrade path that way. But it does appear that FM1 is going to be a kind of a short-lived line.
And it happens sometimes. Part of the problem when you're moving to a new architecture is sometimes you sort of get things rolling and you find out a lot of stuff that you didn't predict mathematically or in the computer simulations, and all of a sudden you're like, let's, another 100 pins would really make a big difference.
Right.
In terms of making everyone happier. Dylan, our condolences, but sometimes you get the socket that sucks.
Yeah.
So
it's all right. It's still a good system while it lasts, and it's a budget system, right? It's the most expensive processor is like $185. It's not meant for necessarily long-term upgrade status. It's kind of built for, you got $500 to spend, boom, done. Best system you can get for $500, that type of thing.
Right.
So.
Brian's got a question about Optimus. Did NVIDIA discontinue their laptop Optimus technology? I went to their homepage today to see which laptops have the tech, and the only one listed is the Dell M17X. Has there been problems with this technology? If so, does AMD have anything comparable? Now, this is the stuff that allows you to actually switch between the discrete GPU and the Intel GPU, basically to use the Intel GPU for battery savings and the discrete GPU when you want to get your 3D Mayhem on, right?
Yeah, so it allows that switching to happen without the user's interaction, without the user's intervention, and automatically and seamlessly. You don't have to reboot your system and stuff like that. Optimus is not discontinued in any way, and a lot of laptops use it. I'm a little surprised to hear that they were only listing the Dell M17X as having that technology. It's, ASUS machines, MSI machines, the Alienware machines are obviously one of them, but I think Dell and HP's use them as well. It sounds to me more like their product team just kind of dropping the ball.
I think maybe Alienware / Dell paid for the positioning at the bottom of the page. because it's like featured notebooks, and then there's a buy now link. So,
I mean, that's kind of disappointing, right? Because I mean, obviously, here's an example of a consumer that wanted to see an entire allotment of laptops that use Optimus technology, which is a good technology, and it actually does work. And if you look through some of the notebook reviews we posted on PCPro.com recently, you'll see that it does make a difference, and it's a good technology. AMD has something comparable. I forget what it's called right this second, but it's not as robust a solution. It's not as neat and pretty a solution. It kind of requires more dialog boxes and user intervention on a daily use case type of thing. It doesn't do profiling and automatic updating like the NVIDIA system does. So it's still a very valuable technology in the notebook world, while discrete GPUs are still very popular for mobile applications. So I don't know. I can ask NVIDIA for an entire list of what their Optimus systems are and ask if they've got a more robust selection than the M17X that they want to promote to consumers.
It also might be because I think they were just transitioning to the GeForce GTX 560M, right? Because they were talking about that, I guess, today at Computex 2011 in Taipei, which was, gosh, was this back in March already? Sometimes also, when they're transitioning between chipsets, GPU chipsets, you can see sort of a lull in the availability of certain technologies.
Yeah. But that's definitely true.
Toshiba and Alienware should both have notebooks with that.
Yeah, like I said, I know ASUS and MSI do. We've tested those in-house. So,
one last question before we go. Email from Daryl about PCI Express 3.0 and Ivy Bridge. You want to grab this one?
Sure. Daryl says, I'm looking to upgrade my PC in the coming weeks, and after much deliberation, I've decided to go with the ASRock P67 Extreme 4 Gen 3 mainboard. One of the main reasons I decided on this board is for future-proofing, as it has PCI Express 3.0 already on it, plus the ability to run an Ivy Bridge CPU once the launch, assuming the socket stays the same. I'm just wondering if the PCIe 3.0 this thing has is going to work fine when video cards that use it come out, or if it's going to be crippled in some way. And do you think Ivy Bridge is going to work perfectly as well? This is one of those look into the crystal ball types of questions. So the PCI Express 3.0 implementations that some of these motherboard manufacturers have been touting on their motherboards. MSI was the first one to do it. ASRock has one. I think at least one other vendor has one or is planning on releasing one, Gigabyte or ASUS. I can't remember which ones. But it's not, PCI Express 3.0 is really just higher clocked, higher bandwidth connectivity. So what they're saying that their sockets are capable of doing is running at those higher speeds. Keep in mind that Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge, the PCI Express host, the PCI Express channels come from the CPU themselves, not the motherboard. So all they have to have is qualification testing to make sure the sockets, the traces, the power that they have going between the motherboard and these processor sockets is capable of those speeds. It really depends on the integration on the Ivy Bridge side of things to make sure it's valid. Obviously, what they're doing is they have pre-release Ivy Bridge processors, and they test them to see if they can run them at those speeds on that motherboard. If they can, then boom, they can validate PCI Express 3.0. You're not going to get those higher end speeds until Ivy Bridge is actually released, which is important to point out, right? You can't run at a higher speed than what the processor and where the PCI Express hosts actually can run at. My expectation is that Ivy Bridge will run on the majority of P67, H67, and Z68 motherboards, pending BIOS updates. And if they're promising a Gen 3 motherboard, if they're promoting PCI Express 3.0 as a feature, there's almost fully, because chances are they've already tested some of the pre-release versions of Ivy Bridge on that motherboard in order to make that claim at all. So I think it's a good route to go down. I don't think PCI Express 3.0 graphics cards are going to be really that close to release of PCI Express 3.0 specifications. We're not really, in most cases, we're not hitting any kind of bottleneck on PCI Express 2.0 in terms of graphics card performance. Only when you get into like heavily utilized multi-GPU configurations is that really even a concern. But Ivy Bridge is going to be a good part. It's going to, secede over Sandy Bridge. We'll probably see that before the end of the year as well. IDF is not next week, but the following week after that. We're going to get lots of details about Ivy Bridge architecture there. So we'll know for sure, well, we'll be able to question Intel directly on whether or not Ivy Bridge will work on current existing motherboards there. And, they should be providing that information as well. So it'll be interesting to see, but, in terms of future-proofing, that's about as good as you can get. But I don't know if it's necessarily... I don't know if it's actually necessary, I guess, is what I mean to say. I think most P67 motherboards will be able to handle that if you get one of the higher-end models, something that's capable of the power that Ivy Bridge is going to use as well.
Yeah. As far as we know, Daryl, you're golden, and you are golden until such a time as somebody changes everything that we were expecting as of September 1st, 2011.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be it for this episode of Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. What is coming up on PCPro.com this week, Ryan?
Let's see. We do have more graphics cards again, of course. We are working on notebooks again. More on the. Actually, I think we have 2 notebook reviews. One of them being a Optimus powered notebook.
Ooh.
So lots of good stuff coming up there. But honestly, I've been gone for 3 days, so I haven't and I just got back 2 hours ago. I haven't even looked at the review schedule on the calendar yet. But we will always have good stuff. Lots of interesting kind of graphics card. Maybe even looking at things like micro stutter, multi GPU, display lag, those types of things. More kind of in-depth research type of ideas. Should be interesting.
Cool.
Now, are you guys back from your Techzilla vacation, so to speak?
I am back. I went to Denver, saw my cousin, got the new transmission in the truck, drove back, spent the next 2 days stripping paint and pulling carpets in my new house.
Yes, exciting.
We had some fun this week, actually. Robert Heron and Veronica Belmont hosted while I was out, and then Robert Heron and I shot an episode that posted today looking at actually the new CalMan consumer-grade hardware. The SpectraCal, actually, the CalMan calibration software is epic. That's what Robert Heron uses for HDTV testing. They came out with a new inexpensive, and when I say that, $300 is inexpensive compared to like $5,000 colorimeter software for sort of high-end calibration, or that you can actually do at home. So he found some interesting things about that. SpectraCal is still his favorite. The new M2 he had some interesting issues with. We talk about professional services for hard drive recovery when you don't want to try to recover the data yourself. Some of the new cable card stuff that's coming out. The FCC actually just set down a new set of rules for cable card if you want to build a home theater PC. And actually, we've got the new USB, a new USB cable card tuner for home theater PCs, and that's going to be up probably next week, the review on that. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. And in our Labor Day episode, we're turning a laptop into a Wi-Fi hotspot. We're upgrading CPU coolers to quiet down your system. And lots of more fun and exciting stuff up at techzilla.com.
Very cool.
I think that's going to be it for this week in computer hardware. My name is Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.